So I began the journey of hiring my first ISA. So I started out with hiring one ISA, and we were in the Keller Market Center, and I had my office, and then right next to me was my ISA, but they were mainly in the office by themselves, okay, on their own. And I found it to be a really lonely position because they were constantly being rejected on the phone. A lot of curse words sometimes people would tell them while I was out busy selling houses. And so what ended up happening is I realized that that position is really more of a team position. So I began the journey of building it out to now having 8 ISAs. They work together in an open environment to where they can help each other, they build each other up, and work through objections and things like that.
So what's their job description?
Their job description is they have set filters that they call that in our system, and then what they do is they dial for 90 minutes straight, and then they do 15 minutes of objection handling together. So the ISA leader gets in with them, what were the objections that you just had in the last 90 minutes? Let's talk those through, and then they get back on the phone. It's 90 minutes again. So it's 90 minutes, objection handling, break, 90 minutes throughout the day.
Right. So how do they get paid?
They get paid a base salary of $24,000, and then 5% once it closes, or if it's a colon, because we're very well branded in our market. So if a seller calls in and says, "I want to hire the Reynolds Team," what will end up happening is they get a flat $150.
So how much can I make?
So the first year, anywhere between 55 to 65,000. So basically, we have a 4.6 month average from the time an appointment's booked to the time closing occurs. Okay. So in the beginning, they're doing onboarding, and then once they're through onboarding, they start hitting the phones. They start with like older leads typically, and then we know that they'll start making money at the 6-month mark. Okay. So between 55 to 65 the first year, the second year they're typically right at 75,000, and then the third year all of them are hitting 6 figures on our team.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great job.
So talk to me about
it's a career. It's not a job.
Okay, so talk to me about the challenges of this.
The challenges have been, so you're an ISA, you're hitting the phones every single day. The challenges have been knowing what happens after the fact, so making sure that we build systems to where they know what their pipeline looks like. So an agent knows because they know how many active buyers they're working with, they know how many active sellers they're working with. But what we found is that a lot of ISAs struggle because they don't know what happened to that appointment they booked. And so one of the keys to keeping them motivated, and something that I see a lot of people struggle with, is that they don't have a system around ensuring that they know what their pipeline looks like. So we built a system where they know, okay, I have this many buyer agreements, I have this many listing agreements, I have this many active on the market, so they know exactly where their pipeline's coming from, and then their commission as part of it.
Now I got that one.
Yeah.
What did I not ask you? I need to ask you.
What are your
I think
standards?
some of the numbers are important.
I want to ask about your standards, but also whatever you were going to say.
Well, that's why the standards are the numbers.
Right.
So for us, it's about, we actually stopped, we were just talking about this in the back, we actually stopped counting dials. We found that when we track dials, we didn't stop counting them. We have an average, which is about 10 dials to a conversation, okay? But what we found is that when we focused on the dials versus the result of an appointment, the results actually went down. So right now, what we focus on is conversations, okay, and making sure that they're hitting those metrics. So our metric is, for out of 8 conversations, they should book 1 appointment. And if they're not, then they spend more time on scripts and dialogues and focusing on those objections.
Now let's just look at my notes real quick. So say that again. So it's
So right now it's 10 dials to a conversation.
10 dials to it.
But again, we don't focus on that. We focus on booking appointments. We focus on the appointments. And then 8 conversations to 1 appointment is our metrics that we're tracking.
Gotcha.
So those are the standards.
And if they're not hitting that, then
we give them 6 months. If they're not hitting that at the 6-month mark, then it's they typically go into some type of, like, I hate to use the word probation, but that's what it is. And then if they don't get out of that, then they're asked to, we guide them to a different career.
One thing you hear with some people, some teams is, oh, these aren't good appointments. They were trying so hard to get the appointment. What are your standards around what constitutes an appointment?
Yes, so we had to define what an appointment is. So on our team, an appointment is someone that's looking to make a move in the next 6 months and both decision makers present. And we track conversion rates publicly. So at our team meetings, the ISAs bring all the appointments they booked, the agents bring all of the agreement, basically the list of the agreements, and then we're tracking to make sure, it's basically accountability for each other. So were those actual appointments? Because when we first started having an ISA team, we had one ISA that was booking fake appointments. And we didn't know because we never got our agents and the ISAs in a room together. And then, so then when we did, the agents were like, that wasn't an appointment, because I started tracking conversion. And so the agents were being held accountable to a conversion, but then based on appointments that weren't really appointments, some of them were renters. So what ended up happening is that we now come together once a week and we make sure that they're legit appointments.
Love it.
Love it.
That's my team leader.
I love that. All right, dear, thank you.
Yes.
So, Karina, let's talk about hiring people. So, in the local group, you have a process. You have an approach.
We sure do.
Can you walk us through that?
Sure. Well, we follow the career visioning process to a T and have added a couple of other steps inside of that. We work to filter really hard on the front end. So we've been spending a lot more time actually in that screening process, really digging into getting to understand, what this person's goals are also on the front end, and making sure that we're in alignment because we're really looking for people that will thrive in our organization. And so we've also been just recently the gal that does a lot of the front end of our hiring process for us moved. Her husband got a job and it became a remote position, and she's been doing that through like video Zoom conferencing, and that's actually been working really well. She's actually found it to be a great time management piece because with them not sitting right there in front of her, she's able to control the time that she's spending with them on her terms a lot more than theirs, which has been really interesting too. But yeah, so we follow every step of the process, the whole way
Walk us
through.
through. I want to hire someone, and I want to follow your process.
Okay.
Lay it out for me.
Well, so first of all, we're sourcing our two big sources for where we're getting candidates from are through Indeed as a job board, and then through our Sphere and our network of different people that fall into that category. And really 100% of our candidates have come from those two sources.
Really?
Yep. And so anyhow, we get the candidates in, we're filtering through those resumes. Once we've filtered resumes, we choose the ones that we really want to dig into a little bit more. We've been sending a disc because sense of urgency is a really big core value for TLG. It's what we've really built the company on. And so we just kind of want to see how fast they get that back to us, honestly, more than anything.
Yep.
So once we've started going through that filtering, we've done the phone screening, now we move into meeting those folks in person. We go through all the steps of the KPA, should we choose to move forward through each of those different steps and getting to know them. And then we get that perspective piece, right, which is the third big leg.
So I want people to hear that because this is a good idea. The disc is the easiest. Either that or you could use Dr. Alessandro's or anything like that. The disc is a really easy thing to use that allows you to quickly get a snapshot of what you think they might be. But you don't stop there. Ultimately, you go to the KPA. Why?
Well, number one, really the first intention of us using that disc was it was more of like a sorting tool, honestly, because it was something that super quick they could do and get back to us. And we were actually just really watching the time it took them to get it back. That was first and foremost. But absolutely, the disc assessment is just such a quick blink. And any assessment you use, you really need to dig in and be able to verify.
Most of these people are stopping at a disc.
No.
There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, please don't. Well, it gives you such a small piece of information, right? The KPA is looking at both pieces. It's looking at your behavior style, but also your thinking process. And that's such a big difference between the KPA and almost every other assessment tool that's out there. The disc you can cheat. I always say it's like a bathing suit. What shows you is interesting, what it doesn't show you is vital. Right.
When you use a disc to hire people, in my mind, you're revealing an extreme ignorance hire people. You can use it as a screen. I think that's a beautiful thing to do. But if you're using that as a decision-making tool, you're a fool.
Well, it's really just a blank, right? And it's it's a small piece of all the things that you need to really look at to look at the whole person.
Absolutely.
And we have the modifier traits in the KPA. There's 3 different modifier traits. So, like how adaptable you are. Certainly, how assertive you are can show up very differently if you're a very adaptable person versus a very less than adaptable or kind of a person.
That's right.
And intensity, right? Like put that on top of assertiveness, and that turns into all sorts of things. So.
Exactly right. We've gone through this process.
Yeah. So on the back end, then we get into that perspective piece, which is where we want to look at, what other people are seeing and hearing when they're talking to this candidate. And so we have our group interview process. And we actually are even right now working with people on our team who are really interested in being part of the group interview process and getting them trained a little bit better to sit in and what things to listen for and how to ask questions, that are a little more powerful. And the one part of it, and references, that's the other piece there. The one part we were honestly, transparency, we were cheating a little bit was the defense. Because we felt like we were defending at every step of the process, right? We'd always come back together again and sit down and go, okay, well, we thought this and we saw that, and really kind of, mastermind around what we were hearing and seeing. And we decided, let's put this back in the way it's meant. I'm a firm believer every piece of that process is there for a reason. And we did, and it really has proven to be great for us to catch some things that I think as an organization we were really seeing we were missing. Some things in maturity, and ways for all of us to come back together again.
And I promise you, there are people in the audience going, this is just overkill. There's no freaking way. I don't care that between the two of you, you've generated 15 million in GCI. I still don't buy into the idea that y'all know what you're talking about. I'm much wiser than you, even though I've never hired a person, or I've only hired 2 people in my life, and they didn't work out. But it doesn't matter. This is just too much.
It was interesting.
By the way, that was my initial reaction several decades ago to this conversation. So I say that, and I'm referring to myself. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort to do what you're talking about doing. Yes?
Sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So what would you say to me or to anyone who said, come on now, do you really do this? I mean, come on.
Well, yes, 100%. And we've added a couple of steps to it, too. And you're either going to spend the time in the front end or you're going to spend the time later on, right? And
Well,
to spend...
say that again.
You're either going to spend the time on the front end before you hire them, or you will spend a lot of time on the back end once they're hired. And if you're spending that time on the front end before they're in your organization, before they're making decisions for your business, before they're impacting the culture of this group that you've built, right? Whether that's a group of 2 or a group of 91 will be on Monday, right? I know.
That's right.
They're not in your business yet, so to spend the time on the front end, right? It's time, guys, one way or the other, but it's a lot less risk.
So here's what I believe to be true, and that is if you have a sales business where you have an employed person, whether you have 1 or 2 or whatever, but you have 1 even. And you also have maybe an agent or 2 or 3, or in some capacity you have agents. The culture keeper is the employee. It is not the salespeople. It is the employee. It begins and ends with the administrative people that you've brought into your company. And most real estate agents don't think of it that way. That hasn't gone through their head yet. They just believe everybody is supposed to be, quote, in culture. But that's actually not the way you build culture. The way you build culture is by hiring people that you write a check to, and because you have the absolute right to expect them to be in the culture that you want for your company, correct?
Yeah.
So it begins and ends with that person. It does not begin and end with the real estate agent that will be on your team.
Yeah.
And it's one of the fundamental cultural mistakes that you see real estate agents make. They're over here trying to culturize agents. Stop that. Turn to the men or women that you have hired that basically run that side of the business, and hold them accountable to bring their culture and make that let them be the culture bearer, if you will, for the company.
Well, oh, go ahead.
We tell our administrative team that they hold the culture, because this industry has like a 95% fail rate. So people that get 85 to 95% depending on the year, right? And so we want them to come into the Reynolds Team office, and it's like a family that they're basically embracing them. And we've been able to keep people in this industry a long time because the administrators are the ones that keep the culture, and they're really the ones that also are the ones that retain our agents because of the strong culture that they bring.
I agree.
So 100%.
You agree with that?
Absolutely, and it's why we're spending more time really making sure that the folks that are participating in that group interview understand what they're listening for and how to ask those questions. And I'll tell you, when we bring our folks in to do that group interview, they protect our culture at the absolute highest level, and they know that if any one person walks out from a group of 6 or 7 people and is, just unsure, I can't even maybe articulate why, we don't hire them right then. That is a stopgap. And they take it so seriously, and over time, that piece of our culture it's just grown itself.
What's really interesting is I get the question all the time of how to manage people. And I go, learn to hire better. Yeah, you don't manage people, by the way. Anyone in this room want to be managed? You don't manage your way to success. You hire your way to success, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Callie, let's talk to you. So I saved you to the end because we're going to have a slightly different conversation. Hold the book up and tell us a little about yourself and tell us about the book, and then you and I are going to dive in.
Sure, so I'm Hallie Warner. I'm from South Burlington, Vermont. I have worked with Adam since 2010, which is when I kind of entered the Keller world. So I've been working with him for almost 9 years now. Started out as a listing assistant, moved into the EA role fairly quickly, and then started replacing myself in various positions. And now I am his chief of staff for all of his organizations.
And
yes.
Go ahead.
And we wrote this book, and I think it came out on February 10th of this year. And it's really about that partnership between the entrepreneur and the executive assistant and or chief of staff, whoever that right-hand person is, that maximizes the reach and effectiveness of the leader of the organization.
Yeah, so I love this premise. So walk us through it. So fundamentally, tell us what the book is about. What's the force multiplier?
Yeah, a force multiplier is somebody, like in our world, it is either an EA or a chief of staff who has the same job as the leader, the founder, the entrepreneur, the mega agent. We're each doing different pieces of the role, and together we're really leading the organization. So I actually don't run ops, I don't run any one particular team. I really act as an extension of Adam at all times.
So walk me through it. What are the principles?
Well, one of the principles that we like to talk about a lot is the 0 to 10 principle. So, for example, Adam can take a project from about a 0 to a 1, maybe a 2, and then he will then turn it over to me to take it from a 2 to a 9. And this is a project that is something that he is personally working on. So I will then take it from about a 2 to a 9. Sometimes at this point it's about a 9.5. I work with our executive assistant to handle that middle portion. It's a lot of research, planning, prep work, and then we turn it back over to him, does his final finessing, and then at that point we have a 10. And that's really, in our opinion, what that partnership looks like. It's really 2 people, 2 halves of one brain, working together to grow an organization.
So in the book, and then you laid it out in our conversation, you said there's 3 ways for an EA to be a force multiplier.
Yes.
Can you walk me through those?
Sure. So there are 3 key components of being a leader, and we talk about this a lot. 1 is casting a vision, 2 is providing clarity, focus, and direction, and 3 is removing roadblocks. So as a force multiplier, it is my responsibility to cast the vision, provide clarity, focus, and direction, and to remove roadblocks. I just do it in a slightly different way than Adam does, but that's exactly what I'm doing too.
So give us an example then for a situation with an EA where she becomes a force multiplier for the business.
So when we talk about casting the vision all the time, that's how we attract talent. So Adams has this big, massive vision. It's my responsibility as a force multiplier to draft memos, draft emails, help us hold company-wide meetings, making sure that the cadence of the communication is kept, and that we are constantly providing that
So if he has a
message.
if he has a project, something very specific, and he turns to you and says, "We need to execute on this,"
Yes.
and you immediately put on your force multiplier hat, and the first thing you do is you cast a vision for that project.
Yes, he will usually have the end goal in mind, and I would need to figure out how to get there. So that might be talking to various people. I need to bring other people onto the project. Our first question is always who's going to do this? It's not going to be me or Adam usually.
Right.
So we need to go find out who's going to handle that particular project initiative. If we're starting another company.
Keep going. So then what's the second thing I'm going to do?
So then we need to put timelines in. So that's the next step, is the clarity and direction. So what is the timeline? Again, who's going to handle what pieces of the project? What are the deliverables? Making sure that I'm holding those various stakeholders accountable to making sure we get those targets complete.
Yep.
And then it's also my responsibility to help remove the roadblocks along the way. Maybe that's just making sure they have the right tool or system in place to execute on whatever it is that they're executing on. Maybe we need additional staff. Or it could be refocusing them and saying, don't work on these projects, work on this project instead. This is a higher priority.
Right. Right. So what are the challenges that an EA is going to have in trying to be a force multiplier? So they say, I want to do it, right? So they're either sitting in the audience, or they're going to watch this video, or the agent bought a copy of the book, looked at it, and said, I want you to be this force multiplier in my life, right? So all of a sudden, EA goes, oh my God, we're going to seminars. Right, yeah. But there are going to be some challenges in order to be that. What would be some of the challenges that this administrative individual could run up against in trying to be a force multiplier?
I think there are two things. One is their behavior and making sure that they know who they are and making sure they're aligned with the right founder or entrepreneur. I often see EAs who are fantastic and they want to run really, really fast, but their entrepreneur or their executive might not have the same big goals and big vision. They're just not going to be the right match. And that also happens the opposite way, a behavior that is a little bit wants a more steady or stable type of, it might be great in the corporate environment where there's 70 EAs supporting many different executives, but in a very entrepreneurial world, that person needs to move really fast and really drive the organization. So behavioral match is one, and then once that match is the correct match, just keeping up with the founder. I mean, they run really fast, they're usually visionaries, and being able to keep up with them is always a challenge.
I want to get a copy of that book. How do I get it?
Amazon.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. So Sarah, we'll start with you, and we're going to work our way down. So, what do you think the biggest challenges that real estate agents face in hiring and working with an administrative team
So,
or individual?
and we did not plan this at all, by the way, but me and my force multiplier read this book and we took their class together, and it really impacted us. So we're a baby relationship with my personal executive assistant, and it was a huge, it helped us a lot. So thank you guys for doing it. So what's the biggest challenge is really understanding each other. So making sure that you spend time with one another. I think that you talked about that in the book. I realized that I was sadly putting my time with her last in all that I had to do, and really she was my number one priority for the week. And after I read that book, I realized, and I would constantly tell her, I'm always saying, speed of the leader, speed of the pack, let's go, keep up with me. But that's not fair, right? If you're not sitting down and making sure that they understand what your priorities are and your goals and things like that, then it's on you. A lot of people want to, I talk to rainmakers all the time, and they might complain about their administrator or their executive assistant. And really, when you turn the mirror around and say, okay, are you spending time with them? Are you setting the expectations? I mean, I realized that I had made some major mistakes after reading the book, and it's been really life-changing, to be honest.
That's awesome.
With our relationship.
That's awesome.
Biggest challenges?
Yeah, biggest challenges. Hiring and working with someone you hire.
Sure. Honestly, I think part of it's clarity, right? And I think so many people dive in out of desperation and panic you were even saying earlier, right? Like, when you get some of that money, start putting it aside so that you know who your next hire is, but you need a plan for that. And so to have clarity around what your mission, vision, and especially your core values are for your organization, and having a plan for how you want to grow the business, but then really taking a stand for staying true to, especially like I said, those core values, and not settling, because you're protecting not only your business, but you're protecting the lives of your people inside of holding that. I mean, I just think that's such an important part of your standards, right?
Yeah.
All metrics are part of your standards too, but that piece of it, the other stuff shows up when you really, truly take a stand for your business and for your people and for their ability to have greatness and a big life.
Yeah, I love that. Helen, we'll end with you. What do you think?
Sure, I think one of the biggest challenges of hiring support staff in general is one, just making sure you're identifying exactly who it is that you're looking for. That's the first thing. Then once you've got that person on board, just making sure that you are really pouring into them, teaching them, training them, and understanding that they're running your business, and they shouldn't just be paid some administrative salary, right? I mean, these people are running large businesses, right? So really understanding the value that they provide to the organization, administrative staff, or whatever you end up calling them, they are your most important people.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Awesome. I give hugs. You can't live